Howdy, y'all. Welcome to Once Upon a Time in Texas, episode number 70. I'm your host, Michael Mitchell. So, a couple of random stuff. I guess I started adding this in a while back, and some people are like, that's hilarious. You need to keep doing it. So, here I am. So, first and foremost, Saturday night had a improv show that I was in down at the Backdoor Theater. If you don't know what improv comedy is, watch a little bit of Whose Line Is It Anyway? And then put a little bit of Wichita Falls flavor on it. A little bit more adult humor because the suggestions come from the audience. And you have the Backdoor Theater Improv Troupe. We have a great time. We love it. And we had a great turnout, another sold-out show. People were laughing their faces off, and we always like to do that. So that was great. If you are in the Wichita Falls area and you have an opportunity to come to one of our shows, people love them. It's the most fun you can have on a Friday or Saturday night for like $12. So it's great. It's a fundraiser for Backdoor Theater, which is a non-profit theater. And yeah, we just absolutely love it. In other news, rain, and then when we were tired of rain, we got more rain. I don't know the exact numbers, but pretty sure that we've had what you could just describe as a metric shit ton of rain. I think our yearly average, somebody told me this recently, so don't quote me on it. I think our yearly average of rain around here is somewhere like 18 inches or something. I may be way off, but somebody told me this, and apparently year to date we've already had like 26 or something. Anyway, in Texas terms, it's a shitload, which is a lot. For those of y'all that don't know, a shitload equals a lot, and the word shitload is actually pretty universal. Doesn't have to just do with rain. It could be just if something's heavy. If you're carrying a bunch of stuff, oh man, I've got a shitload of plates at my house, whatever. Just means a lot. So a shit ton, I think, is a little bit smaller. But anyway, there's a whole scale of those measurements, and you should look them up. Maybe I'll do them in a future podcast. But with rain and everything, I had one of my rent houses flood, and it wasn't the main house in the front. It was I've got a building in the back that's split into two apartments. They weren't finished when we bought the place, and we ended up doing a lot of work to get them really nice. And then it flooded. And when I say flooded, I mean 18 inches plus inside the buildings. Never happened before. Hopefully never going to happen again. But so I thought, well, thank heavens El Banco required me to have flood insurance on this property. Well, flood insurance came back and said, well, we're deeming that an accessory unit, and accessory units are covered under our policy for $2,000. And so although you had a huge chunk of damage, we're going to send you $2,000. I was livid. I mean, to the point my wife was like, holy crap, you're going to have a coronary, like, sit down. And I stewed about it for a while and finally decided to write an appropriately worded letter back to the carrier's desk adjuster. And my response was simply, are you freaking kidding me? Am I being punked? Is this a joke? And then left it with that for the weekend. I mean, this was on a Friday night, and I was pissed. I'm glad I didn't talk to the guy at that point. Anyway, Monday, he emails me back, and he said, oh, I am so sorry. This is the property where the front and rear house are covered under all of the square footage, correct? And I responded, yes. And we do have one accessory unit, which is a shed, big nice shed, that we were told we had to cover. And he said, I am so sorry about the confusion on that. Let me cancel your $2,000 check and we are going to reissue for a significantly larger amount that is going to cover the repairs on the house. So, yeah, if y'all were anywhere around Wichita Falls, Texas yesterday, you probably heard me woohooing and doing the happy dance. I was pretty excited. So anyway, there you go. Of course, there's all kinds of stuff going on in American politics right now that I'm not going to get into. Y'all check it out. There's just some weird and crazy, interesting stuff with Trump, Dr. Fauci, and now Hunter Biden. And apparently, I don't know, everybody's pissed at everybody else, and apparently they're going to do something about it now. So we'll see. We'll see. That's going to be interesting. So let's just jump into the podcast. It's kind of enough of what's going on. Oh, sorry. Yeah, what else is going on? So my parents are coming back to town today. It's Tuesday the 4th. They're coming back to town. They took one of the Viking River cruises up or down the Danube River. They went from Budapest, Hungary to Salzgard, Austria. And while we have had epic rains and historic rains and flooding and tornadoes and all kinds of other stuff here in Texas, apparently they're having the same over there. And my parents, their boat, their Viking cruise boat, the Danube River was out of its banks. It was too high, and apparently like massive flooding. Some people have died. It's like a crazy thing. And anyway, they were like, yeah, sorry, we're having to stop all boat traffic on the river because the boats can't go under the bridges there when it's really, really high. And so they got bussed on their final day to Salzgard, I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, Austria. And then they got bussed up to Munich. And then I guess at like 2 a.m. this morning, which they were 7 hours ahead of us. At 2 a.m. they left, got bussed to Munich, flew from Munich to London. And I guess now they should be flying back to Dallas Fort Worth International Airport. So they should be back. I'm sure they're going to be wicked tired when they get here. Probably a little crabby, but that's okay. We'll give them a day or golly, I've got the hiccups. A day or so to kind of rest up. And yeah. And then me and my son are off to scout camp. And daughter number 2 is going with my folks to Raton, New Mexico to do a shooting camp. And it's just going to be great. So, all right. So let's jump into this podcast. So there are many explorers in the world, both in current times and in history. We're always fascinated by explorers, you know. Amelia Earhart and the Apollo 13 crew and Neil Armstrong and, you know, Christopher Columbus. And explorers just always catch our imagination. And have you ever wondered who's really considered the first explorer of Texas? Yeah, I have. And I did a little research. And we're going to look into that today and kind of talk a little bit about who that was. Before we jump into it, though, I'd like to thank our sponsors as always. That is me and Victory Home Loans. I know there are tons of people moving to and in Texas and Oklahoma. And I know many of y'all do too. So if you know anybody that's looking at moving, looking at buying a new house, send them my way. TheMichaelMitchell.com. TheMichaelMitchell.com. I'd love to help them out. And even if I'm not licensed in a state that they're going to, or if Victory Home Loans is not licensed in that state, I've got a lot of friends all over the country that are mortgage loan originators just like me. And I'd love to hook them up and help them out. Basically, as always, working with a mortgage loan originator like I am is faster, cheaper, and easier than working with your typical bank. And the reason is we have the opportunity to shop lots of different lenders versus just one lender. And so, yeah, It's a great deal. We end up saving money. I've done a couple of VA loans lately. I'm working on an FHA loan and really helping some people get into those houses of their dreams. Of course, as always, remember, when you work with me, I sell dreams, not mortgages. Doesn't that sound nice? Because who wants a mortgage? Nobody. But they're necessary. So give me a call. Give me a shout. Look me up. TheMichaelMitchell.com. TheMichaelMitchell.com. So, where did this week's idea come from? Well, Facebook. Plain and simple. A story popped up about an explorer that lived from like the 1880s to the late 1950s. And I'm going to screw up his name, but his name was Peter Freuchen, who was a Danish explorer and is most notable for exploring the Arctic during what is called the Thule expeditions. Thule. He is notable for all kinds of things. He was a fascinating, interesting character. But there were two things that stuck out to me. Apparently, I mean, everybody assumes, as most explorers were, that they kind of embellished a little bit, made their expeditions a little more interesting, get people interested in what they were doing. I mean, Teddy Roosevelt, I don't think did it. Teddy Roosevelt was just a real badass. But this guy was maybe not quite equally as much a badass, but I mean, did some pretty cool things. So he's notable for lots of things, but there were two that stuck out to me. One is that his first wife was Inuit, which I don't know how things were in Denmark where he came from, but I mean, him being, an explorer and everything, and then taking a native Inuit wife was probably a little taboo, but anyway, he did it anyway. And she traveled with him on his expeditions. I mean, she was Inuit. She knew the land and all that, so she traveled with him quite a bit. When she passed away, he wanted her buried at a church graveyard in Upernavik. Or Upernavik. I don't know how you say that. But anyway, the church refused because A, she was Inuit, and B, she wasn't baptized. And so Peter gets a little pissed off about it, goes to the graveyard, digs a grave and buries her himself, and then outwardly, verbally, and pretty big time criticizes the Christian church for sending missionaries there to convert the Inuits to Christianity without understanding their culture. So, kind of interesting there. Basically, the church gave the finger to him and his wife with her being buried there, and he gives the finger to the church, buries her anyway in the graveyard, and then gives the other finger to him by calling him a bunch of buttholes. Basically, the guy was just like, there it is. Second, and this is what I found interesting. Second, there's a story that when he was dog sledding across Greenland, an avalanche happens, and he ends up getting stuck under the avalanche. And the story is, and he claims to have used his own feces to fashion a dagger to dig himself out. Yeah, let me read that again. Let me slow it down. He's stuck under an avalanche and claims to have used his own feces, his own poop, if y'all don't know what feces is, his own poop to fashion a dagger, which I assumed he molded like clay and then stuck it in the snow and ice somewhere to let it, harden up, and then dug himself out. Yeah, pretty badass. Now, obviously, we don't have stories of people fashioning poop daggers to dig out of avalanches here in Texas because we don't really have a problem with avalanches. But I did want to look at some of these first explorers in Texas and what they were looking for. They too did meet with some trials and tribulations, obviously different, not requiring poop daggers. But obviously, and most of the time, early exploration often does lead to trials and tribulations. I mean, people die, weather events happen, famine, they're not able to find food, all kinds of stuff. But I thought the stories here were still a little fascinating. So here we go. These are kind of the 5 early explorers of Texas. Now, before we jump into it too much, though, I want to start out with there is a lot of rich history with Spain and Mexico. And if you know any history of Texas, Texas was owned by Spain for the most part for a long time. So I'm not going to go into all of that history, but let's preface the rest of this conversation with Spain basically claimed a large chunk of the United States way back when, including Texas. B, they did not really care about natural resources other than really minerals, mainly gold and silver. That's what they were here to look for. And then C, we need to acknowledge, were they really the first explorers? No. I mean, not really. I mean, the Native American peoples and tribes had been here for a hot minute. Like, they really had. I think they had been here for a minute or two, maybe a year, before the Spanish arrived. But, in reality, the Spanish were the first to document it. So they kind of get the glory, I suppose. Because, most Native American tribes did not have a lot of, or really any, stereotypically, written forms of communication. It was all done verbally. And the Spanish wrote stuff down, therefore, they kind of get some of this glory. So, where did I find all this? So, thestoryofTexas.com, and I'm going to pull it up right now. StoryofTexas.com/discover/campfire-stories/conquistadors. Anyway, this is the Bullock Museum, which is a great museum. I've heard great stuff about it. I think, if I remember right, the Bullock Museum is in Austin. Just has some cool stuff. So they're talking about the conquistadors, who are, for the most part, considered the first explorers of Texas. And so here's what our campfire stories from the storyofTexas.com says. And I'm just going to read it from them because I can't really say it a whole lot better. Soon after Christopher Columbus arrived in the Americas in 1492, the Spanish began to hear stories of civilizations with immense riches. Yep, there's that gold and silver we're talking about. Hoping to claim this wealth and territory for Spain and themselves, conquistadors, or conquerors, sailed across the Atlantic Ocean. When they ventured into the mainland, they found an immense landscape that was already home to tons of thousands of American Indians. Conflict between the two groups was frequent, leading to misunderstandings, exploitation, and violence, as often happens. While their explorations gave Europeans a better understanding of the Americas, the conquistadors who explored the land now known as Texas often failed to find the wealth and resources they were looking for, leading the Spanish to focus colonization efforts further south for many, many years. So, really the first guy that we know of is Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca. When Cabeza de Vaca joined fellow Spanish explorers Panfilo de Narvaez on an exploration to conquer and colonize, God, I can't read today, the North American Gulf Coast in 1528, he began a journey that would take more than 8 years to complete. Could you imagine that? Like, hey, I'm going to go explore this land. Like, we go, oh, we're going to go explore. My parents were like, we're going to go explore some of Europe. And they took a Viking cruise for whatever it was, 8 days. Now, these guys pony up, sell ships over here, and they're like, screw it. We're going to be here for a year or two, and then it ends up for 8. So, In 1519, the explorer Alonso Alvarez de Pineda became the first European to map the Texas Gulf Coast. However, it would be another 9 years before any Spaniards explored the Texas interior. Hear that right. 1519, the guy maps the coast of Texas. And then 9 years later, they decide to come back. In 1528, another expedition led by Panfilo de Narvaez set sail from Spain to explore the North American interior. A long series of disasters, again happens a lot, left most of the expedition dead. That sucks. A group of 90 men headed by Alvar Nunez Cabeza de Vaca shipwrecked near Galveston Island. The party, including a guy named Estevanico, a North African enslaved man, is believed to be the first person of African descent to set foot in North America. Despite receiving food and shelter from the nearby Karankawa tribe, only 15 of the men survived the winter. For the next 8 years, Cabeza de Vaca and the remaining survivors would become the first Europeans to view the diversity of the landscape and people of what we now call Texas. Moving between the mainland and the coast, Cabeza de Vaca worked as a trader and a healer to survive, with the ultimate goal to make it down to Mexico City. So, on his journey south, Cabeza de Vaca rediscovers 3 Spaniards who had been separated from his party soon after their shipwreck. These men had been enslaved by an American Indian group known as the Mariamas, and then once reunited, Cabeza de Vaca was also enslaved. So 6 years after the expedition began, the 4 men escape the Mariamas one by one and head south, where they were taken in by members of the Avavares tribe. I know I'm screwing up some of these names, but I'm trying. After recuperating for 8 months, the men set out for Mexico. They followed a winding route that covered approximately 2,400 miles and took them south of the Rio Grande, across northern Mexico, and eventually south to Mexico City. In the 8 years they spent in Texas, Cabeza de Vaca and his companions failed to discover any gold or claim any new territory for Spain. So Spain was probably pissed. Instead, they returned with tales they'd heard from the American Indians of riches elsewhere in North America. Rumors like those fueled the Spanish exploration of Texas and the surrounding areas for nearly 70 years. So, now we go to the next guy, Francisco Vasquez de Coronado. Yep, Coronado. So Cabeza de Vaca's tales of riches were reinforced when a Franciscan friar reported cities of gold in present-day New Mexico. In 1540, Viceroy Antonio Mendoza ordered Francisco Vasquez de Coronado to lead an expedition to the northern reaches of the Spanish Empire to conquer the region and claim the wealth for Spain. Coronado gathered 1,000 men and thousands of horses, mules, sheep, and cattle for the expedition. They marched north for 2.5 months before reaching the Zuni Pueblo of Hawiku in present-day northwestern New Mexico. Instead of streets paved with gold, the party found a city of more than 500 families living in buildings constructed of sandstone and adobe. Coronado read the Zunis the Requirimiento, a document in Spanish that ordered them to submit to the King of Spain's rule and convert to Christianity. The Zunis, of course, weren't impressed, responded by firing arrows at the Spanish soldiers. Because why not? I mean, seriously. Some guys come bebopping into town, and by the way, you're going to submit to a new king, and you're going to convert to a new religion. Pretty sure the Zunis were like, yeah, I don't think so. And so, despite the Zunis' best efforts to defend their city, the Spanish soldiers stormed the city walls, and captured or killed most of the Zunis who could not escape. Soon after he seized Hawiku, Coronado heard rumors of another golden kingdom, Quivira, in the east. He headed in that direction, crossing the Texas Panhandle on his way to the Great Plains. He sighted Paladura Canyon during his expedition, but found no treasure. Coronado returned to Mexico City empty-handed in 1542. So that's a long time, couple of years. His failure to locate the 7 cities of Cibola, Quivira, or any other riches really discouraged further Spanish exploration in the region for a whole lot of years. Coronado's interactions with the Zunis were typical of how many conquistadors approached the American Indians. The Spanish read them the requirimiento in a foreign language, and if the Native Americans resisted, the Spanish just took what they wanted by force. These tactics, of course, led to conflict, suffering, and often death for many American Indians throughout the Western Hemisphere. I mean, yeah, I get it. The Native Americans were probably a little pissed. These guys come in, they're demanding stuff that sounds unreasonable. Piss on you. We're going to keep doing our own thing. And then they get killed for it. So, as Coronado was returning to Mexico, another Spanish expedition stumbled into present-day Mexico. Hernando de Soto and his men set out from Florida in search of large cities and abundant treasure, of course, but the expedition found neither of those things, as most expeditions of the time didn't. And in the spring of 1542, right in the midst of his explorations, de Soto falls ill and dies, leaving a guy named Luis de Moscoso de Alvarado in charge of the expedition. After burying de Soto on the Mississippi River, Moscoso and his men abandoned the search for riches and decided to head west to Mexico. They marched into Ayiz and Caddo territory in present-day East Texas, where the Spanish soldiers attacked Caddo towns and stole the American Indians' food stores to feed themselves. One Caddo chief ordered his men to guide the Spaniards into another, less well-stocked band's territory. These guys are stealing all of our food. So the chief went, hey, listen, hold up. We're going to guide you. There's this tribe over here that has a lot more food. They really don't, but they do. And chances are that tribe had probably pissed off this chief at some point. So why not? The enemy of my enemies are friends. And so, anyway, so these enemies that are stealing their food, listen, hey, we're going to be your friend and we're going to lead you over here to our other enemies and you guys can attack them, kill them, take all the food, which gets them out of our way. So anyway, Moscoso discovers the trick eventually and he hangs the guides. And then they turn back to the Mississippi River. And there they built several small boats, sailed down the Mississippi, and followed the Gulf Coast to Mexico. Upon reaching Mexico in September 1542, Moscoso reported the expedition's failure to locate any of the large, wealthy 7 cities of gold that de Soto had sought. His account, combined with Coronado's failure to locate any of the cities of gold, reinforced Spain's decision not to explore the northern frontier. So here we go. Jump forward 40 years. It's 40 years before explorers returned to the northern boundaries of Spain's territories again. This time, the Spanish weren't searching for gold, but for missing men. In November 1582, Antonio de Espejo set out from Nueva Vizcaya, Mexico, in search for some friars who had traveled to northern New Mexico to, of course, convert the American Indians there to Christianity and save all their heathen souls. I added that part in. Espejo learned early in his expedition that the 2 friars had already been killed by members of the Tehuex tribe in present-day New Mexico. Nevertheless, he continued on and explored the areas to the north and east. He pushed north into the Tehuex territory when headed east until he reached the Pecos River. He and his men followed the Pecos south and crossed into present-day Texas, where they were welcomed by the Jumano, who acted as Espejo's guides, leading him across the Trans-Pecos region and back to the Rio Grande. One of the members of Espejo's expedition, a guy named Diego Perez de Lujan, kept a daily record of the journey. He detailed descriptions of the landscape and American Indians the Spaniards encountered and encouraged further exploration and eventually settlement of present-day New Mexico. However, his descriptions of the Trans-Pecos region didn't inspire the Spanish to explore what is now Texas any further. Mostly because they were out in West Texas, and that's just a tough environment. So here we go. Number 5, Juan de Oñate. Juan de Oñate would be the last of the conquistadors to traverse present-day Texas. Unlike his predecessors, his explorations would have a direct and lasting impact on the region. In early 1598, so now we're talking about 100 years of exploration, Juan de Oñate led an expedition to settle present-day New Mexico. Unlike some of his predecessors, who were only tasked with claiming land and finding resources, Oñate was ordered to establish a colony. Many of the colonists in his party hoped to find their own riches mining silver. On his way north, he crossed the Rio Grande at El Paso del Norte, the site of modern-day El Paso. It was there that he formally declared Spanish possession of what is now New Mexico. After establishing the colony's new headquarters near modern-day Santa Fe, Oñate followed in Coronado's footsteps and headed east in search of the City of Gold, because why not? We go establish a colony and we find gold. Heck yeah, let's go. Like Coronado before him, he failed to find any riches on the Great Plains. It's because they were looking for gold, and they were not looking for the vast riches that is the Great Plains of the United States. During his brief time in the region, Oñate's expedition found nothing the Spanish were searching for. No cities of gold, no precious metals, no jewels. However, his actions would have a great impact on Texas in the coming decades. His route through El Paso del Norte, a route already well known to the Native American populations, who had used it for trade long before the Spanish arrived, became El Camino Real del Norte. The road would serve as a crucial lifeline connecting New Mexico to the capital city of Mexico City. Its location on El Camino Real del Norte made El Paso del Norte an important trading and transportation hub in the future, and it still is. And I remember reading something that basically one of these explorers had basically put in his diaries that basically all of New Mexico, Oklahoma, Kansas, Colorado, Texas, they kind of explored a whole lot of the region here. Basically said it was a barren wasteland, and what they really meant is that they weren't seeing the great grass and the crops that could grow here and all that stuff and what it would take to really establish colonies here. If they'd had a little different vision, we'd all be speaking Spanish now, I suppose. But yeah, basically they wrote it as, summarizing it up, everything sucks. Why would anybody want to live here? There is no gold, there is no silver, there are no jewels. Basically, big giant suckiness. And obviously, now that we are Texas, we know better. So there you go. What do y'all think? 5 early Texas explorers who wrote things down. What other kind of weird, off-the-wall, or interesting Texas history would you like to hear about? I want to thank our sponsors again, of course, me and Victory Home Loans. Keep in mind, if you know someone moving in Texas or Oklahoma, or really anywhere in the West, have them holler at me. TheMichaelMitchell.com, TheMichaelMitchell.com. Remember, I sell dreams, not mortgages. Thank you all for tuning in to Once Upon a Time in Texas. And as always, remember, the stars at night are big and bright, deep in the heart of Texas. Y'all have a great week.